Baie welkom terug by GROOTplaas. Ons gesels vanoggend met Vaughn Koopman, melkprodusent en regeneratiewe landboubestuurder by Danone Suid-Afrika. Vaughn, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Izan. Nice to be with you this morning.
Nice to speak to you as well. Vaughn, tell me why regenerative agriculture speaks to the need of biodiversity.
So regenerative agriculture is a way that farmers can farm that supports the biodiversity on their land. So biodiversity is really fundamental to farming. If you think that soil, for example, in a handful of soil, there are more organisms than there are people on this planet. And it's those organisms that make soil fertile. So without those organisms and without that diversity in the soil, you have less soil fertility.
Yeah.
And of course, soil fertility is so really important for production on a farm.
Absolutely. How would you say can the private sector and industry develop sustainable balance that benefits the dairy farmers, especially for long-term resilience of ongoing supply of safe quality milk and milk products over the years to come?
So it's really important for business like ourselves to realize that farmers are essentially partners in our supply chain. So by recognizing the partnerships and the linkages, it helps us then look for ways where we can work together and how do we support each other. So that's really what's so fundamental. And through that realization, you start a partnership approach. You start understanding each other's perspectives, and you start looking for tools and approaches and technologies that can help each other.
Yeah. You speak on the tools and technologies. I want to hear from you what specific regenerative practices are being adopted by milk producers that you work with, like cover cropping, etc. Will you be able to elaborate on that? Yeah,
so I think it's important to realize that, you know, farmers have been for many years. I would say, I've been in this in the business nearly 30 years.
Sure.
And we've seen an evolution of practices. So, you know, if I think a decade ago, what was fairly mainstreamed was minimum or no tillage.
Okay.
But really now with the regenerative agriculture approach, it's looking at the farming system as a whole. So not just isolated activities, for example, you know, minimum tillage.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that thinking is what has advanced in the last 5 years or so, is realizing this holistic nature of a farm and then looking for practices that are more than just one. So, for example, keeping you know, your swirls covered right through the season after harvest.
Yeah.
Keeping live plants, you know, on your soil surface, so the roots are live right through your off season, for example.
Yeah.
You know, bringing in animals. Dairy is obviously, animals are part of the farming system, but there are some farming systems where animals are not part. So realizing that they play an important part in the nutrient cycle. So that's, and you know, minimizing at the same time your chemical usage as well, be it pesticides, herbicides, or artificial fertilizers. It's not to say you cut them out, but it's dealing with them in a careful and knowledgeable way, realizing this holistic view that you're taking.
Absolutely. You speak about the holistic approach, but what would you say will be the key differences that you've observed between the conventional methods and then the regenerative dairy farming systems that you see today?
So, yeah, it is definitely this holistic approach. I mean, an example would be as well that goes beyond pure agronomic type of interventions. There's technology, you know, that's advancing, as we know, very quickly. And an example of that is, for example, what's been developed with, in a sense, as a Fitbit for a cow. And you know, they're incredibly advanced, complicated animals. We tend to think they're not, but they're sensitive animals. And these Fitbits have been developed to show or to monitor an animal's fitness. You know, how it tracks their rumination, So it gives farmers an early warning sign if the animal is not well.
Yes.
It also helps a farmer pinpoint the most fertile period of that animal. And, through enhancing that increases efficiencies of your farming system. It helps a farmer make timeliest decisions.
Yeah.
And that also is an important contribution into this holistic farming. So it helps a farmer minimize his input, be that chemicals, but it's also his time, so that you are able to, as a farmer, focus on other priorities. For example, it just makes one much more efficient, and so you're using, in a sense, less to get more productivity or the same productivity.
Yeah. You mentioned efficiency with regards to your time. I want to know if you think that the regenerative practices that you've mentioned now, is it cost effective for the milk producers in the short and the long term then?
So that is a key challenge, and it is something that we are, investigating, and through careful data analysis. So that's also, really key. Is that the old saying is that you can't manage what you don't measure. So that is fundamental in improving one's efficiency on the farm. So, all anecdotal indications and from experience that we've seen is that it might be a challenge in the short term for a farmer to transition, for example, from conventional tillage to no tillage, or tillage, or minimum tillage, and minimum to no tillage. That is a challenge because of the unknown that may happen. But we've seen that it does, in the medium to long term, help a farmer's profitability, because you're starting to harness some of the natural processes in nature. I spoke earlier about the organisms in your soil. They're there to start. Their role is to make that soil fertile. They're making chemicals that are unavailable, to plants, that they make them available naturally. And then that decreases a farmer's reliance, for example, on artificial fertilizers. And that has a cost implication. So it can take some time. And that's the role, that business can play, is helping bridge that transition for a farmer.
Yes. Vaughn, in what ways would you say can corporates that rely on milk and develop milk products can support farmers to achieve regenerative agriculture then in South Africa?
Yeah, so I spoke about that risk bridging. It's really important. I think it's understanding, as I said earlier, that the interrelatedness of the supply chain. That your farmer supplier is a partner, in a sense, in your business. It's really key to start understanding respectively your supply chain and your production systems, and then mapping out that understanding. And then looking for solutions and ways of measuring and monitoring, because that then informs your decisions. So, a business like ours, for example, has a wide network locally and globally, and leveraging expertise, into these partnerships is really where business can help support farmers.
Yes, absolutely. And in your opinion, the importance of mainstreaming biodiversity in an organization, what would you say?
It's really, really important. And, we've seen that process rolling out, and it's been happening in our business. It's also a holistic approach. It's got to be part of every function's responsibilities. It's so cross-cutting and so broad in its scope that you really do need, from the top MD right the way down through to the likes of myself that work with the farmers, people in finance, people in purchasing, because those decisions all interlink and help drive impact essentially at scale.
Yes. Absolutely. And then just a last question, you as, from Danone South Africa side, how do you help farmers balance the need for productivity with environmental stewardship?
So it's looking for the win-win. There, as I said earlier, is that there are definitely opportunities where a farmer a farmer can reduce their reliance on certain inputs. They can refine their production systems and their methodologies through the adoption of technologies, through the adoption of this holistic approach. And that can reduce the reliance on expensive inputs such as fertilizer without necessarily compromising yield. So it's really, really important not to force to change. It's to look for the synergies and the opportunities that make sense from, let's say, a biodiversity point of view, which is supporting the productivity of your farm without compromising the business side of farming.
Yes, I understand. Vaughn, just before I let you go, I just thought of something interesting for me then. Would you say there are current policies or certifications in place that support these regenerative milk producers?
So we have some broad policies that I think are important. It gives an indication to business, to society, of the country's intention and our ethical responsibility towards the planet and responsible business. So there aren't any elsewhere in the world you get things like subsidies and so forth, which is not what we have in South Africa. But with the role of business increasingly becoming involved in supporting their supply chain, it's becoming I think much more sustainable in the long term because of that more interconnected, holistic approach that is starting to happen in agricultural supply chains. So that is supporting change, I think, in business and in agriculture.
Vaughn, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you, Izan.
Thank you.